All right, we're live with Shelf Space, episode 14. And as usual, we have Charles live from Montreal.
Hey, everybody.
We have Gina from Toronto.
Hello.
And myself, I'm Chris. I'm from Edmonton, Alberta. And we have a special guest from the other side of the world. Adeeb Mynul from Kinetiquettes is joining us for this episode.
Welcome.
Hello. Hi, guys.
Hey.
So, Adeeb, we're going to be running through this is going to be all about Kinetiquettes. We're going to run through your specific background. We're going to go through the city in which you live, Singapore, and why it's kind of a hotbed for collectibles. Anime, you guys are getting into the anime licenses, gaming stuff, and just sort of what you guys have planned for the future. So if we're ready, well, let's just get right into it, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
So we're going to get into your background. So you mentioned to me that you came originally from the video game industry.
Yeah, that's right. So I studied animation. So I came to Singapore. I'm not originally from here. I came to Singapore in 2003 to study animation. I came from Bangladesh, and so I studied animation traditionally. And since young, I was into gaming and stuff. So I ended up eventually working in the video games industry as an animator. And I've been working in the game industry. I mean, I started working in the games industry in 2006, and I started working in a Japanese game company, which you might be familiar with. It's called Tecmo Koei. They were originally Koei, then they merged with Tecmo.
I know Tecmo Bowl.
Yeah. So the guys who did Ninja Gaiden, and then
okay. Yeah.
Koei is the one which did like Romance of the Three Kingdom games and those Dynasty Warrior games. So they kind of merged together to form Tecmo Koei. But when I joined, it was just Koei. So I was working there for a while. Then I eventually ended up in Ubisoft, where I worked there for about 6 years. And again as an animator. Then eventually, I went into like teaching for a while, and then ended up where I'm doing now.
Right. So when you were at Ubisoft, you actually worked with Mufizal. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
All right.
We were colleagues. Yeah.
So you guys were in the same office, working on the
Yeah.
same games, type of thing. That's neat. That's kind of small world kind of stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. Singapore is really small, so it's like if you're working here especially the games and animation industry is like the animation industry itself in Singapore is very small. So yeah, like we knew each other, and in fact, it's because Mufizal used to do sculpting as well. So it's actually his work that kind of inspired me to you know uh, dabble into sculpting after working hours. So that's where it originally started of me trying to because I did sculpting in school, but I had some interest in it, but I was mainly studying animation, right? So after work I was like I want to do something else, something different. So I started dabbling into sculpting after I joined Ubisoft because I saw like his work, and then I thought, hey, cool. I got some tips from him and started dabbling in it. Yeah, and then that's where my origins of so-called sculpting, in sculpting and sculpting for clients, started. That's what started it all. So yeah, it's interesting.
So good thing you guys came across each other, I guess. Then, hey.
Yeah,
So you mentioned you do some sculpting. You do a little bit of traditional sculpting too. Is that right? Like with.
yeah. So that's how I actually started. So um, my initial dabble into sculpting was traditionally. So I started sculpting with clay, um, and that was the whole point of me doing it because I was like, oh, I'm like working in animation. I'm using the computer all day. So I want to do something by my hands and dabble into sculpting. So I initially started in clay. So when I was sculpting, it was just for fun. I used to do it after work, and what happened was I finished something, and funny thing is that my first sculpture that I like really finished and completed was a Street Fighter sculpture. It was a sculpture of Ryu versus Sagat. Like, so
Okay.
yeah, and of course my being my first sculpture, I'm not really like looking back at it now. You go like, that's bad, but but that's like the starting point. And then when somebody saw it, they were like, hey, I want to commission you to do a Street Fighter character for me. So that kind of led me into the freelance stuff where private clients would come to me and ask me to do one-off sculptures.
Okay.
Well, that seems to be what it takes, right? Like people find you, right? They see your stuff online and they find you. We have found that a number of the digital sculptors that we've interviewed that we admire their work. More often than not, we ask them, so how did you get work? Like, how did you end up doing, Darth Maul for XM? How did you end up doing Punisher for Sideshow? And it almost always the answer is, oh, well, somebody saw my stuff online.
Yeah. Nowadays, it's everything's online. Like, I mean, there's a lot of people doing, sculpting or any kind of art, right? And previously, when there was no, I mean, it's the wonder of the internet. Like you're not local anymore, right?
It's a global community.
Yes, it's a global community, and of course, people say, oh, there's so many people doing this now. How do you make yourself? Like I have students who say, oh, how do you get into the industry, or
how do you distinguish yourself?
Yeah, how do you distinguish yourself? So, but my point is, it's a lot easier now to get yourself out there. So the only prerequisite for you to be recognized is, previously you not only had to be good, but you also had to get your work out there some way or the other. Send your work to companies, through snail mail and all that. But now all you have to do is focus on being good and have a website. That's all. Like or your work online. You don't even have to build a website. So it's like the outreach. Like while there's more competition, but it's also easier for you to get your work out there. So people can just focus on being good at something and just building a portfolio out of it, and eventually somebody will come to you and say, hey, I need you to do this for me.
That's great stuff.
Can you tell us your transition from the traditional sculpting to digital? Like you were doing it for fun, just like traditional sculpting, and then you figured, hey, let me try ZBrush now.
Yeah, sure. I was doing, initially, of course, in clay, and then most of my client work was done in clay, and I would do everything from like start to finish, and including painting the sculptures. But then ZBrush came along. I think this was in 2014 or 13, around there. So that's like, of course, ZBrush has been around for a long time, but it started to become more and more mainstream. And with the advent of 3D printing, so I was like, okay, let me give it a shot. And I hated it at first. I was like, oh my god, who's going to use this thing? It's like terrible.
Why did you was the user interface not that friendly, or?
Yeah, it has a steep learning curve. Okay. But once you get the hang of it, it's very intuitive, and you just can't like when it comes to quick workflow and being able to do quick changes, like it's just a dream. And I mean, right now I can't imagine doing something traditionally for commercial work.
What you're saying, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm finding that companies are starting to feel the same way, that they can't really imagine themselves working with a traditional design now. They just only want to work in digital.
Yeah, the very big plus point is that it's easier to make iterations digitally and compared to traditionally, because there's literally no Control Z button, right? So
right.
So it's much easier to make iterations. But I'm not going to say that ZBrush makes the work better, or ZBrush artists are better. No, it's in fact, if you're really going to be a good digital artist, it's always a big plus to be coming from the traditional side, because they give you the foundations. But in terms of workflow and speed, to be able to deliver something quickly and change something quickly, that's the reason why companies have, and most people adapted digital. And it's basically the same foundation that you're working on. Like it's just a different medium. It's just makes things convenient in some ways. Of course, digital also has some of its downsides where some like sculpts, because in digital you just need to sculpt one side and then you have symmetry to which kind of builds up the other side for you, right? So um, if the sculptor is not experienced, they can create a completely symmetrical sculpture. But in real life, organic things like human beings are not perfectly symmetrical, right? So you have to be experienced enough and have enough working experience to know that you can't build everything perfectly symmetrically. You have to
Tell that to the fan base.
yeah.
So I just wanted to I grabbed some of your portfolio from your DeviantArt site.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to throw some of those up right now. So we got a Cloud Strife here you worked on.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about this one.
Yeah, this is interesting. Like when I started doing freelance, initially it was like Street Fighter, and then somebody came to me. I think it was my second or third freelance work where they said, "Oh, I want to do a Final Fantasy character," and which was actually the Final Fantasy VIII Squall, the main character from Final Fantasy VIII. So I did that, and from there suddenly, like, I have like dozens of requests, people saying, "Hey, that's a really cool sculpture," and then that's the one you have on screen right now. Yeah, that's the one I first.
That was your first one. Okay.
Yeah. So once people saw that, and I think it got like in DeviantArt you get like featured. So that I think got featured. So suddenly I got a lot of requests of people asking me to do like Final Fantasy commissions, and that's how the Cloud one came about. And yeah, it was it's all done traditionally, and it's I think even today, I mean, usually when I look back at my own work, I'm not like I would say like I see tons of things wrong with it, but at least this one. At least this one.
I'm trying to think if there's one artist who did not say that to us. It's like mandatory. When I look at my older stuff,
yeah,
it's all part of the learning curve. No one starts amazing at what they do.
Then we got this sort of, looks like kind of like a demon. I'm not sure what that is. That a made up character, or is that based on?
Yeah, so it's something I actually initially I remember earlier I mentioned to you about our art director Kiet. He's my business partner as well, and he's the art director. And in fact, we used to work together before we set up Kinetiquettes. So he used to do designs with me, and then I would do the sculpture. So this is one of those characters that we designed together, and I made the sculpture of traditionally. So it's kind of inspired by like, for example, it has a little bit of a Batman look, right? So
yeah.
It's like a mythological kind of take on Batman, where it's like mixed with Hades. So you have this concept of this character that it's like, what if those superheroes that we know and love were in the more of a mythological setting.
Yeah. So then you got some looks kind of a Thor-like lightning bolt.
Even Superman, old Superman
Thor mashup.
Yeah, it's more of a Superman Zeus mashup actually.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah. And then we got this girl here. So these are all sculpted by you traditionally, like with your hands and clay. So that's that makes you unique in this day and age, I think. Not many people seem to be doing much of that. So we're going to move on. We're going to talk about your adopted home of Singapore. And you said you're originally from Bangladesh, and you moved to Singapore for your academics training. Is that it, or for work?
No,
or
yeah,
both?
definitely for because back home in my country there wasn't really much of an animation course or to learn animation, because I was interested. I got into it initially with animation, right? So I was looking for schools overseas, so I ended up coming to Singapore to study. Yeah, and then so I was studying for 3 years, and after I graduated, I got into video games, doing animation. So after that, when I went to Ubisoft, that's when I started to dabble into sculpting, and that's what led to where I am today. But yeah, so in Singapore, it's like it's a really cool place. It's a small island. I mean,
we've been there. We were there a couple of years ago.
Yeah. So it's small, but it's quite nice. I mean, the country, the people are nice. it's generally safe. You can walk in the middle of the night without
Yeah. So I mean,
worrying about it.
people who aren't familiar with it, this is I've got on screen. This is the Marina Bay Sands.
Yeah,
I've got the Art and Science Museum. This is what's the name of the bay here? Is it just
it's
Marina Bay.
Marina
yeah,
Right.
Bay?
exactly,
The
yeah.
Marina Bay. So I mean, this is the big touristy spot where you're probably going to go if you go to Singapore. And we got not far from there, we got these big lit up trees.
These are all your shots, right?
These two are mine. Yeah, from
Oh,
that
that's
one night.
amazing.
Yeah, that one night that we stayed up late and went out. We
Yeah,
thought that we
the
thought
city.
maybe it might cool off at night, but we were wrong.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, it's hot.
very
Yeah,
interesting.
it's hot as hell in here.
Yeah.
I still can't get used to the weather.
Yeah.
It's hot all the time. So what I wanted to bring up with this topic was Singapore seems to be a real hotbed for collectible companies. You got, of course, yourselves, Kinetiquettes, HMO was based there, XM was there. We got Mighty Jacks is there as well. Why is that? Is it because of is there great training, art training there, and the artists stay there, or do you have any explanation for us?
I don't know. It just so happened that, um, yeah, like it just so happened that we have all these, companies doing like statue companies originating from here, um, because initially, like, there weren't like it was initially XM who started out first, and then we have Imaginarium Art, and then HMO, then us, and so it's like, um, yeah, it's just I mean I myself don't have an explanation of why suddenly there's all this.
I actually do have an explanation, and maybe you could tell me if I've got some, if I'm onto something.
Yeah, sure.
You were saying earlier that in Bangladesh, there really isn't a lot of movement. There isn't a movement for this kind of work, for this kind of industry. Whereas countries like Singapore are very much always on the cutting edge of technology. They want to stay modern, they want to stay relevant, and they would be open to new emerging entrepreneurs and new emerging businesses, new emerging ideas. And when you go to Singapore, you probably have a better chance getting support from banks, getting support from artists in the area. There's just it seems like a greater accessibility when you're in Singapore than if you're in Bangladesh. That's just my guess and things.
I mean, there's definitely there's a push by the government to help startups and entrepreneurship, and yeah, help businesses. Like there's a lot of incentives for businesses in Singapore to be to they kind of help them to help them along. But I think it's kind of interesting that you bring that up because mm but I feel that like while our business is kind of benefiting from that, but I think it didn't really encourage us to start the company because of that. So I that's why I myself I'm a little baffled that why are there so many companies? But I guess part of it is also that in Singapore definitely is like there's a lot of collectors, whether it's statue specific or not, but there's a lot of hot toys collectors, a lot of like figurine collectors, like anime figurine collectors. So I think there was sort of like a small industry here where people collect figurines, statues, and whatnot.
And they
So
have the foundation there too, right? The
yeah,
stores, the shops, the
yes,
internet access. I mean,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's like if you want to be a movie star or if you want to work in computer animation, there are some places that you're going to have more success than others,
yes,
right?
and
You know,
yeah, it's also like because of that, bustling industry of collectibles shops and whatnot. As you might be aware, that XM themselves had where they had kind of like a small retail shop selling garage kits and things like that. So um, that kind of initially had its small customer base, which kind of probably pushed them to give it a shot. And especially now with globalization and the internet, it's like you can be anywhere in the world and start up a business that kind of works. Of course, being in Singapore helps in the sense that you're near China, where the most of the production takes place,
yeah.
and
Right.
the incentives from the government to help entrepreneurs and small startups. So I guess that does play a part, and yeah, I mean, I guess yeah, it's just kind of a mixer of things that kind of help.
Yeah, I was going to say
Extra.
that does the geography kind of help because
Yeah.
I know if you need to go to China and do some QC, I mean, you can do that in a couple days or whatever. And
Yeah,
for us to go to China would be a huge undertaking.
yeah, it's just a 3.5 hours flight, so it's
Right.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, so
want
it's
to
like me
add
going to
one
Montreal.
thing. We'll go to Montreal in a minute.
Yeah.
When Chris and I were in Singapore a couple of years ago, I'll speak for myself here, but I think I could probably speak for him as well. It's not that we were surprised that Marvel and DC wasn't everywhere, but it was a surprise to see how much I didn't recognize, right? Like here we are, we're three Canadians in here, right? And we kind of know Western comicdom, Western media, Western entertainment, and we don't always get to see. We're not very familiar with what's happening in the other side of the world, even with some of the stuff that you showed us here today. I mean, some of it looks great, but I'd be hard pressed to be able to tell you who that guy is or where he originated, what movie is he from, or who are the other characters in that same world. But we are interested. Why? Because in the last couple of years, we've done some Statue Forum Awards and some Statue Awards in general, and we are amazed on who ends up winning these things. These aren't, it's not Hulk or Captain America that's guaranteed to win. You know what I mean? So there is an entire industry out there and people are taking notice, and it's opening the doors to companies like yourself and HMO. Like this year, HMO won, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So that was kind of a surprise to fans who thought that Hulkbuster would win or Thanos would win. So, go
this
ahead.
is a good. Sorry, Charles, you're making a really good segue for our next topic. So we're going to move
Hold
on
though.
to.
I have one question.
Sure.
So just
We'll go back.
jumping back to startups in Singapore. Can you sort of give us your the steps you took from moving from animation? You were working with them. You work with like Mufasol in animation and whatever, and obviously you made the move for sculpting, and then you made the move to make your own company to do collectibles. Can you tell us about that move and that transition?
Yeah, sure. So initially, like I said, I was doing it just as it all started out as just as a thing to pass time after work.
A hobby.
Yeah, a hobby, right? So, and then which led to me doing some freelance work where people asked me to do commission. So what was happening was that I was doing animation during the day, and then at night I would go home and do like the freelance work where I would be sculpting and doing all the things to deliver the work. So I was doing that for about 2 to 3 years, and then so I was like, oh, cool. I mean, I have a lot of clients coming to me, and then as I mentioned before, I was working with my friend Kiet to do and design some original designs of characters. So we were thinking like, hey, we love certain characters, like you guys, like you guys are into DC, Marvel, and all that. So we also like Kiet is a big DC Marvel fan as well, and I'm into like game characters and stuff. So we thought, hey, why don't we really do this like we've never like really produced any custom work. Like I've done work for clients as one-off pieces, but I've never like really went and done custom work where I produced a particular licensed character and sold it, because I always felt that the intellectual property is something to be respected. So we never dabbled in that. But then we thought, hey, we want to do this and the legit way to make our favorite characters, design our favorite characters, and then we want to be officially licensed doing them. So it's just like one day over coffee break, I thought, hey, why don't we just a few of our friends, we came together and thought, hey, why don't we just set up a official
shop.
Set up shop, and then try and see if we are working in because Kiet himself works in animation and films, and I work in video games. So we were like, hey, why don't we just reach out to our contacts in the animation and film industry and see how if we can secure a license that we love. And then one thing led to another. We ended up with the Street Fighter license, and then we were doing it like part-time. So that means we had our day jobs, and then we also were like doing it like doing our like managing the business and doing all the sculpting and all the production. Like it was all part-time initially, and then it was only like in 2018 last year where I like kind of jumped in full-time doing this. Yeah,
Well, at
so,
one point you do, right? At one point, you're starting to get to work, you're starting to get recognized, people want to work with you, then yeah, at one point it does have to become full time. You have to make a
yeah.
choice.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why I left the animation industry to into teaching for a while, because like I just didn't have enough time. So I was like, okay, maybe teaching will give me a little bit more time, and it did to some degree. Like during school holidays, you have a little bit of downtime. So yeah, that helped a bit. And then eventually I was like, I have to focus. So I was like, okay, I'm diving in. So it was scary, but yeah, it worked out.
So quickly before we move on, I wanted to ask you if you had to describe for Gina the taste of a durian in one word, what would you use?
Is that a fruit? What is that?
Well, use that term loosely, Gina.
Okay.
Okay. Before I explain that, have you guys had durian before?
I have, yes.
The smell was enough for me. I'll just say that.
Okay. Okay, so my experience is kind of unique because I always thought durian is like somehow related to jackfruit. Have you guys ever had jackfruit before?
No.
No.
Okay, so it looks similar because it's yellow. Yeah, you can Google that. Yeah, Google everything you're not sure of. Yeah, that's how it works nowadays.
I'm just gonna get a picture here. Just hang on.
That's durian, yeah. But it's like it looks similar because durian is yellow color and then jackfruit is also yellow. So I had jackfruit before and I was kind of allergic to it. So when I came to Singapore and I'm like, I see durian, I'm like, oh, I'm staying the heck away from that. That looks close to jackfruit. And then people say about the smell, but the smell didn't really bother me. So I thought, but I always used to think that I would be allergic to it because it looks like jackfruit and all that. But then I actually tried it and actually it was quite nice. And I thought,
you liked it?
Yes.
What would you say it tastes like?
If you have good durian, it's very creamy. It's almost like how do you explain? It's almost like if it's those high quality durians, it almost tastes like a dessert, like you're having a dessert. It's creamy, it's soft. Of course,
almost like ice cream, or
it's like pudding.
Yeah,
it's like pudding.
Yeah, it's almost like something between ice cream and pudding.
It's a Jello pudding cup.
Yeah, but
that smells and tastes like onions.
All right.
Okay,
it definitely it's not definitely not for everyone. It's if you're okay with the smell, the taste is not that bad. But if you're not okay with the smell, yeah, you probably can't take it. Or you can't stand it.
All right, so we're gonna move on to anime. You guys are dabbling into that genre. You've got a couple licenses now. And now I had someone tell me recently that anime couldn't possibly be that popular. I always wanted to get the opinion of someone like yourself who's getting into that world. How do you see that genre, and do you see it as being fairly lucrative for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of lucrative, it's like for us, our one thing that's a prerequisite for every single license that we get is
can you make money?
No. That's actually not that's not the reason why we get a license. For us, it's do we love the characters? Do we love the anime? Do we want to make characters out of this license? That's the very first prerequisite. And secondly, maybe we will think about, is this can it be legitimately, like are the characters sellable? Are the statues sellable? So the prerequisite is, do we love characters from this series, or do we love these characters or not? That's our first prerequisite. So we started to do anime characters and licenses because we thought that we wanted to expand our portfolio out of games, and then thought, hey, we love these anime like Attack on Titan and then My Hero Academia, the two licenses that we announced recently. So so we thought we love the anime, so why not? Like the anime themselves are very action packed, so it kind of suits our style of making statues, because usually our statues are kind of dynamic and movement and all that. So so it just just happened that we wanted to do anime, and these are the two animes that are in our watch list right now, and that we really like. So,
Right,
so coming back to your original question of why like anime is the big thing now, it's like as I mentioned before,
More like still the big thing.
yeah,
I think
still
that's a better way.
Yeah,
it always was, yeah. But
it always was, but maybe it was a little bit more popular in the East than in the West. But now it's becoming very global, and also because like initially, as I mentioned, in Singapore there was a lot of like collectors, but most of the collectors here were collecting anime figurines and statues. So, so in the East, like in Singapore especially, it's like more of the collectors are into anime, especially the young kids nowadays. Um, although by saying that I sound a bit old, but
it's okay. That's okay.
yeah. So it's like the collectible community is more into anime, and the people watch anime here. So it's actually quite big, and in fact, I didn't even know there were like high-end collectible statues of anime, because all this time, I mean not all this time, it's like previously I thought, oh, anime mostly has figurines, PVC figurines, and not resin statues as much. And it's true even now, because in Japan people have limited space, right? The homes are smaller, and PVC figurines are cheaper and take up less space. So it's
But I think the same thing happens in North America as well. I think most Marvel and DC fans and comic book fans, they're not introduced to collectibles via statues. It's usually first through like figurines. I don't think I've ever met a collector who was first introduced through statues and then found figurines after. It's usually the other way around. For some reason, I think statues is still a smaller market. So we're all introduced to the figurines and to the smaller stuff first.
I myself started collecting, like I was, my very first figurine was Batman PVC statue. So it's like it all starts out with PVC because it's more affordable. So it's like slowly transitioned into resin statues. So yeah, I mean, as I was saying, like people were more into anime, and the anime figurine and PVC were more popular.
Well, you know what? To add to this point, if we're going to be brutally honest about things, if we look at the edition sizes of anime statues and compare them to edition sizes of Marvel and DC, you're going to see a vast discrepancy. Nowadays you're seeing edition sizes of 500, 700, yet anime still gets 3,000. There's certainly an industry there, and people willing to spend.
Yes, and it's exactly what Gina mentioned, is that the PVC figurine collectors are transitioning to the resin. So what's
the higher end collectible?
Yeah, the higher end collectible. So what's happening is all those people, like which made Sume so popular, is because when they introduced resin anime statues in good high quality, cool designs, creative designs, people just jumped on it, and that's what kind of propelled them to where they are today. And that's because that fandom of anime, and they were mostly collecting the PVC stuff previously, but now they're slowly starting to transition into resin, and that's where you see all these companies coming in to jump into that pie and try to grab it.
Well, North America had a very similar transition. When people first hear the price of statues, it's like, oh my God, what are you talking about? That's like a down payment on a car. But once they actually buy one and they see it in their house, they kind of get seduced by it, right? They kind of go like, wow, this is like nothing else in my house. And then their friends, their family or friends come over and they take a look and they go, what is that? And I got to tell you, I've been collecting for over 20 years. And I got to tell you that happens often when people come in and they see these high-end collectibles, hand-painted, quarter scale. I imagine it's got to be the same on the other side of the world too, when they're having guests come over, especially when it's recognizable characters, right? It doesn't have to be Batman.
So you mentioned the two licenses that you have. I mean, the first one that we'll go through here is Attack on Titan. And this is one that, I'll admit I don't know a lot about it. I have the manga in my reading queue, but I haven't got to it quite yet. So
what
quickly,
is Attack on Titan?
I was going to say,
Okay,
just quickly describe it for us.
So you can, okay, just to give you a premise of the anime, it's like it's like almost like a post-apocalyptic kind of setting where humanity has been kind of being pushed back by like all these mysterious giants that appeared, and they're almost like zombies, but giant zombies, which they don't really have a mind. They just eat humans. So it's like,
Okay.
yeah. So it's like the humanity has been like kind of pushed to build a wall and a small, like they kind of gathered in this small city with a wall around it to protect themselves from the giants.
How do you
So it's
kill
like,
them?
so the only way to sort of kill Titan is where you saw in the picture is like they have this like gear attached to them, which kind of lets them swing around like Spider-Man and get up there and slice a particular spot behind a Titan's neck, which is so called their weakness, because you can do whatever you want to them, they won't die. So the only way to kill them is like there's a spot behind their neck. So that's why the so-called the gear that you see the characters have on them is like that allows them to swing up there and reach.
Oh,
them.
I see it. That's a very cool look.
Yeah.
Do you have an image of the Attack on Titan statue?
We do. We have a teaser from Adeeb here, so we'll get to that now. So we'll throw that up on screen. So, could you tell us a little bit about this?
Who's the sculptor on this one?
It's the same sculptor who did our Devil May Cry statues, our Femme Fatale, the Street Fighter statues. Yeah, his name is Wanda. So he's also sculpting this with us. So so this is the main character from the anime.
Nice
Of
work.
course, this is just part of the diorama we designed, and so we initially teased part of the character, like the gear, but now you're seeing the like what is the kind of action the character is doing. So I'm not going to go into like very specifics of what exactly he's doing because it's kind of like a spoiler. So, but what I will say is that what makes this anime kind of popular and is because it's not only the story, but it's kind of like a very grim setting, because as I said, it's post-apocalyptic, right? And in anime, usually you'll have like the conflict, and then the main character kind of overcoming the conflict. Whereas this anime is very grim, like people die and
I find a lot of anime like that.
Yeah,
there's a lot that are
Yeah,
not.
I
It's
agree.
not really cartoons for kids. This is adult
like that.
stuff.
and Evangelion and
it's like I mean, like you can say like those anime that kind of portray that grim situation, and then of course usually characters overcome that, but in this anime it's more like you think, oh, the characters are in dire situation and they'll eventually get out, but in this one you're like, oh, they're in a dire situation, they're not getting out. So it's like
Kind of like The Walking Dead in a way. Where people die, right?
Well, like we said, it's all grim. I'm just gonna, as a quick aside, I remember the first anime film I saw was in the mid '90s. It was called the Wave of Amnesia. Is that what it was called? Where there was some kind of storm, and it hit the world, and no one could remember who they were except this one child. Does that ring a bell with anybody?
No,
The Wave of Amnesia. Anyway, all this to say, and I have seen other anime films after that, and it's like so depressing. It's, of course, the good guys win at the end, but the premise is generally so hopeless.
But I think the first one I ever saw, the first anime was Ninja Scroll. Was the very first one I watched, and I think it really opened my eyes to a more adult oriented sort of animation. And I sort of embraced something different, a different type of. I mean, because I grew up with it. I grew up watching cartoons, but and obviously anime is a different type of cartoon, different type of animation. So were you involved with getting that licensing done with this piece here as well? Like, were you
Yeah,
were
so
you,
I
yeah?
actually, so with usually I'm the one this who will kind of explore
Pitch.
options. Yeah, will pitch and explore options to what kind of license to get, and then discuss with our business partners and license partners on, on the pitches, on the proposals, on the and pitch the initial idea of what we want to do with the license. So so just for any other license, we also had to kind of pitch and um, the idea to the licensor to.
Right. It sounds stressful. Is it as stressful as we would imagine?
Okay, so I can give you an overview of like how the kind of process works. So when we first started, when we first got our license, which was Street Fighter, for example, which the first question that was asked to us was that like, what is the type of statues that you want to do, right? Because some companies or licensors will want to make sure that if there's an existing licensor in a particular category, there's no overlap. So they don't want
or area, right?
Yeah, so they don't want like say 2 quarter scale producers of the same license. So initially for us it was Street Fighter, right? So we were asked like, what scale are you doing, and what kind of statues you are doing, because at that time or even now you have PCS doing quarter scale, right? So they didn't. If we proposed quarter scale mixed media statues or Street Fighter characters, we probably wouldn't be. They will reject our proposal. So our initial proposal was what we always intended to do, which was 1/6 scale dynamic, interconnectable characters. So that's something that some companies usually will ask you, what is
Gotcha.
it,
Okay.
what category that you want to do, and then of course you have to pitch what is what are the characters. Some companies will say, okay, which characters do you want to do? Because sometimes you can have a license for a particular category, but with 2 licensors doing the same category but different characters. So there's some leeway there if the licensor only licenses out by per character, right, and not the whole brand. So there's options for that. So they will ask you what characters you want to do,
Okay.
how many runs you want to do, and then without getting into too specific details, some companies will say, how much minimum royalty you can guarantee us, usually companies will say, you want this license, you have to guarantee us a certain number of royalties, which you have to pay in advance. So it's almost like a fee, but it's something it's like an advance. Actually, it's not really a fee, but you're kind of giving them an advance.
They want a guarantee. They'll send you a bill, right? Like even if you haven't produced anything.
Yes, exactly. So they want to make the licensing lucrative first before they even give it to you, right?
Gotcha.
So companies will ask you that, like, how much are you guaranteeing us? And then if they're happy with the number, then they'll say, okay, we can discuss the more minute details of the contract and how you can go about.
How grueling is the approval process? I imagine that they have to see what you're doing before giving you the green light.
Yeah, of course. So every stage has to be approved. So the concept stage, you have to show them the concept art. It has to be approved. And even at the concept stage, some companies will be like, going into minute details to say, especially because in fact, all our licensors are from the Japanese, right? So Japanese companies are really strict when it comes to their characters. So they will, even in the concept stage, they'll be like, oh, the belt buckle is not right. Can you please change that? Of course, like the concept art is not the final stage, it's just the first stage. It's just to get the idea of the concept across, right? But even at that stage, they'll be like, oh, the belt buckle, you're not supposed to have like 2 straps, you're supposed to have 3 straps, like even as small as those details, they will want to nail down at that stage. So it can be quite grueling.
Just so you know, if that wasn't corrected there, the fans would say it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
right?
they would.
You'll get it at some point.
Yeah. So it's so they'll go into minute details like that. They won't really some companies will not will kind of give you the free reign of the concept that you're doing, and not say, oh, this is not right for the character. Like, as long as the concept looks cool, they'll be okay with it. But some companies will be like, oh, this character wouldn't do this, so you gotta change it, right? So there's an interesting, creative.
Has that happened to you?
Yeah. So we we have not really an issue, but actually we kind of appreciate when licensors give that kind of feedback, because while we love the characters, nobody knows the characters better than them. So they because they're the creators of the characters, right? So they will say things like, oh, this character won't do this, so maybe you would want to change that, or they will give you like reference screenshots from the game, because usually we're dealing with game licensors. They'll say, oh, this screenshot in this character does it this way, so maybe you want to tweak the pose, to be like this, and and sometimes they'll give, like in the case of SNK, the licensor for our King of Fighters license, we work directly with the game developers and the designers and the artists, so they will definitely be more critical and say, oh, the expression is not right, the pose is not right, or the face is not right. They will say, oh, they'll give us a bunch of references and say, and this is how it should be.
All right.
Okay, so quickly before I have a question related to licensing, I just wanted to show your other anime license, which is My Hero Academia. This is a very popular license at the moment. It seems like you have yourselves. I think First Four Figures has it. Kotobukiya has it. Sume has it. And I don't know, maybe there's more than that. But so what I want to know is, when you go into these meetings, do they tell you that, oh, we're also dealing with these 4 other companies, and what are you going to do differently, kind of thing? Or like,
with My Hero Academia, we also were made aware that other companies are trying to procure it. So we were asked to kind of tell them like, what exactly are we doing that's different. So I mean, for us, differentiating is not usually, because we don't do that many quarter scale. Usually we're doing like 1/6 scale, and kind of like the diorama kind of statues. So when we mention that, or when we explain that we're doing it in this style, usually it's not an issue. So we had to do the same for My Hero, because we were kind of aware that other companies are pitching for it, and so we told them what we wanted to do or how we wanted to do it, so they kind of were okay with that.
And so, these, just to clarify, sorry, are these licenses international?
Some are, some aren't. Like some are restricted to certain regions, but usually we will work with the licensor to get global as much as possible. So for the anime license that we have currently, it's not global, but it's North America, more on the North America side, but we're also working to get Asia as well.
Okay, so your anime licenses are you're focusing on us then.
Yeah.
Yeah, trying to sell us to it. Okay, cool.
Yeah, but of course, as anime is getting more and more popular, and as I mentioned, it's more anime originated from the East, so obviously more of the Asian countries will be into it. So that's why we're working.
Well, Attack on Titan, I know that's pretty popular over here, so that's a good one to pick up.
It's on Netflix, so I think a lot of a lot of folks here in North America are watching it because of Netflix. They have access.
Is it on Netflix? I should check it out.
I think I think one of the shows, one of the movies are on Netflix.
Yeah, I think if you haven't watched the anime, you should definitely check it out. It's interesting.
I just wanted to add one thing. This is a really good time for what you're doing to have a greater presence in North America, and I'll tell you why. Because I've seen over the last few years, there's been a development of an ennui. I don't want to call it boredom, but kind of I've seen it, done it, been there, and people are seeming to be a little bit more open to something different. And not only that, people are starting to steer back towards 1/6 scale, away from quarter scale, because of the price of these things. So, there's a good timing to what you're doing, and I think it's going to be very good for you.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, definitely you brought up a good point, is because especially because nowadays there's so many companies out there, so many licenses, or multiple companies doing the same license. So we are all fighting for the shelf space of collectors, right? So that's when some collectors are thinking that, my collection is getting so many options, the collection is getting so big, what do I do with these giant boxes in my storage? And so it's like
that's the other part of the problem that people don't always think about.
Yeah, so it's like Your shelf space is getting no pun intended, but
Yeah.
That's all
Shelf
right.
space is getting huge. It's a huge thing. Huge topic. That's right.
yeah. So it's like you're fighting for that space, and it's becoming more appealing to get slightly smaller pieces, and yeah, and it kind of fits into what we usually do.
All right. So speaking of what you usually do, we're going to move on to gaming. This is sort of your bread and butter. You said this is where you came from initially, and you guys started out. I'm just going to show one of your early statues. This is the Oni Akuma and Evil Ryu. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it was the very first statue that we did, and it was all done traditionally. So and people call us crazy for doing this because when we first got the Street Fighter license, and people usually just say, oh, they're gonna do the Ryu, they're gonna do a
Ryu and Ken.
Ryu and Ken or Chun Li first, right?
Yeah.
And then we came up with these two characters, and like, now that I look back at it, like we must have been nuts because it's like these two statues are sold out, but it's like as a business proposition, like you wouldn't think that you would want to do these characters as a start, right?
So who sculpted this one?
I sculpted it with our art director Kiet.
Right.
He helped a lot with the base, and he supervised the art direction, and then I sculpted the characters mainly. And yeah, so it was like all hand sculpted. Everything is
Because
also.
I don't think you put that on your website. You should put that on there. That you did the work on it. You should.
Yeah, I mean, on our website, like we usually whatever work that we do, because it's a team effort, so we just put like we don't really credit, like I don't credit my name as a sculptor or painter.
Why not?
I don't know. It's just like our thing on, it's Kinetiquette, done by Kinetiquettes. But when it comes to artists that we work with or we hire, we will definitely credit them. But when it comes to work that we do internally, like we just want people to know Kinetiquettes, did the design,
I mean, you could be humble about it, but I think it's good to put your name on stuff that you've done. This is not a showing off thing. It's respecting. I think people want to know who did it. These are questions. I can speak for the team. We like knowing who sculpted what. It's
a good point. I mean, yeah, people like when people hear that when people hear you paint the prototypes for Kinetiquettes, they become surprised. Like I actually even do any artwork for the company. They think I'm like the business guy.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
but I mean, I can see your point there, Adeeb, because I mean, I guess you're doing it out of being humble and out of like politeness. It's like this is like a team effort.
Mm-hmm.
No one's gonna. We don't want one person to shine. So I understand I think I can understand where you're coming from, right? You want the whole team to shine rather than just one person or two people.
Mm-hmm.
So I see where that's coming from. But I mean, as what Charles had mentioned, though, I guess collectors do like to know who sculpted the statues that they buy. Because more and more, it's being seen as these collectibles are being seen as an art form. So, and more, and now it's becoming an art form. So to see the same artist and to see what his or her type of work is, it's something that collectors are now following. So, but I mean, I do understand what your mentality is and what,
I guess you guys did bring up a good point. It's like people want to know, like, who did this, who's the man behind the person. So I guess that's a consideration.
I was just kind of giving you a hard time.
So it's a valid point, yeah.
I showed I just as you were speaking there, I was showing some of your Street Fighter pieces. We had Jury, we had Guile and Charlie, Ryu versus Ken. So now we're going to talk about your latest video game license. This would be King of Fighters, SNK. So this one, I had a chance to look at this one. This is Terry Bogard from the King of Fighters series. I know him more from Fatal Fury on the Genesis. I don't know if you ever played that version of the game, but it was kind of a dumbed down version of King of Fighters. But Charles, this is sculpted by someone from your neck of the woods, Rodrigue Pralier. Am I saying that correctly?
Close enough.
Close enough.
Well, you didn't say prolier, so
Yeah.
I'll give you that.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Just as a brief aside, we've noticed that quite a number of digital sculptors are coming out of the Montreal, Quebec area. Have you found that? Have you
Uh,
just noticed that per capita, there seem to be a lot of artists coming out of the Montreal area? Maybe it's their connection
yes,
with Ubisoft.
yeah, there are a lot of yeah, like artists from like not just Montreal, like in Canada in general. I think because yeah, because a lot of game companies are in Canada, right? So especially Ubisoft, which is prominent, but a lot of the game artists transition to doing collectible stuff as well. So I
Right.
guess that could also be a reason why you see a lot of like upcoming artists from Canada. So,
Okay, so we want to show one of the characters you're currently working on. This is, sorry, was it Mai or May? Mai.
yeah.
Yeah. So Mai from, and this character I don't know, as I said, because she wasn't in Fatal Fury, but you're working along with Art Germ, and this is also sculpted by Wanda, who we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Um, so one of the questions somebody had put on our Facebook page was, what's the process like working with Archer, Stanley Lau? Is he involved a lot, or does he kind of just do the concept and then stay out of it, or is he involved along the way?
Oh, okay. So just to correct, if I'm not wrong, I think she was in Fatal Fury before. She because King of Fighters is like a compilation of a bunch of different characters from different SNK games.
I
I
don't I
believe.
don't think she was on the Genesis one. I don't recall her being there, but I could be wrong on that. It's been many
Yeah.
years since I played it.
Anyway, me too. Like I played
Just
it also long
someone can Google it and find it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I can't answer that question.
ago.
She can find it on Google.
Yeah. So yeah. So the
Can you post a
uh,
picture of my backup, Chris? I just wanted
Sure.
to see something quick. Uh, yeah, you see where it says designed and supervised. I don't
Yeah.
normally see the word supervised in a project. I'll see designed by or concept by, but I don't see the word supervised. What
yeah.
does that mean?
So yeah. So it's an interesting question because of course that Stanley Arjun Lau, he's done some work with the Sideshow team and other companies as well. He's done like concept art for game companies, and speaking of Statue of the Year last year, Morrigan, the design was done by him,
Yeah.
all Capcom. So he's quite well known, right? So generally, statue companies will approach Stanley for doing the concept of their statues, and then usually maybe give some direction of the kind of style he goes for. But with our case, it's kind of interesting because he's been a good friend of Kid for a while, and we knew him from days ways back. And so this is the first project he's working with us. And he's been there since the very beginning, from the initial concept to till today, where we're through the sculpting stage, the painting stage, and
Wow.
he supervise. That's what he's really doing, is like supervising every step of the process to make sure this statue turns out exactly the way he wants it.
Yeah, so
So
he wants to be linked to the success. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting again. One of the things I can say, but this is my opinion, I find Stanley is so much better suited for this kind of work, and I'll tell you why I say that, because there was a line for Sideshow where it was very much Stanley-esque. It was Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn, and a Catwoman, and it was given that anime feel, that anime look, and that doesn't work with everybody, right? Because people have an image of what Catwoman and Poison Ivy generally kind of look like, and it didn't fit. But this image looks amazing. It looks great, when he's totally in his element here.
yeah, I think
Just saying
one of
that.
the one of the reasons why Stanley's work has been so popular is he kind of blends the two styles of like anime and realism, and that's also why I believe a lot of companies even the comic companies, DC, Marvel, or got him to do covers or whatnot,
Yeah.
or even Sideshow got them to design these DC Marvel characters, is because his style kind of works on so many avenues. It's whether it's Japanese, or whether it's American. It's something in between, right? So that's why he's been so popular. And I think
Yeah.
working with him, to answer your question, is like working with him has been great. He's very particular about. I think one of the like things he would feel that when he used to do concepts for certain statue companies, um, and the final statue prototype doesn't, because he's not linked to the project so closely, so sometimes the prototype wouldn't exactly look like the style he intended for the character. So I guess we appreciate his involvement, and he also kind of appreciates that we are working with him closely to make sure what we are doing closely resembles what
You're giving him
So
you're giving him the space, so that's great.
it's
That's great.
authentic. So you're getting a real authentic art germ product.
yeah, from
And
start to
speaking of that authenticity, the sculptor you use, I just want to bring him up again here. Wanda Korneawan. I hope I'm
yeah,
saying that close.
yeah,
Here's his ArtStation page. You can see several of your statues there. He's also did the recent Mira and Supergirl, also Art Germ style
Prime
for
One.
Prime One. Here's a close up of the Mira. Um, he's really good at that Art Germ style. He's got that nailed down, I think. So that was an
yeah.
excellent choice for you guys.
Yeah, we've worked with Wanda. Actually, this my also was sculpted by another Korean artist. Unfortunately, she doesn't have a ArtStation or online portfolio that I can refer you guys to. But she did the initial base sculpt, and then Wanda kind of took it and created the
Okay.
base and worked on it further. So it's a two sculptors were involved. Um, but yeah, I mean Wanda, we've worked with him for quite some time. He did our first Devil May Cry. That's the first time he worked with us, and he did a great job. And I think he's like kept improving drastically over every project, and it's really pretty.
So I do have the
Is
Dante.
the My statue available for order now?
Oh no, we are currently working. In fact, I'm painting her right now, and she's on my desk, which I can't show yet. But yeah, so it's like painting the prototype now. Then we'll be doing the reveal next month, and that's when we're hoping the pre-orders will
Great.
start.
Well, let us know, because sometimes we have shows where we just talk about what's upcoming, what's exciting, what's in the pipeline, and share our opinions. And we don't only talk about Marvel and DC, at least not anymore. So let us know when you get this finished design out.
Yeah, sure. We'll
So
definitely spread the word.
So, sticking with the King of Fighters line, you've got a couple more upcoming characters from that game. We've got, is it Kyo
Yeah,
and Iori? Am
Iori.
I saying these right?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
We are terrible.
I am terrible. When I did that jewelry review for you or preview for you guys, Adeeb, I was saying it Yori through the whole thing, and I got ripped for that. I really did on YouTube. And so I want to make sure I get this right. So Iori and Kyo is on the left. So I'm going to throw up the teaser here. Let me just find it right here.
Where'd you find these animated gifs, Chris? They're cute. They're cute.
Yeah, I just got them just off Google. So here we go. Here, these are the two guys. Now, is this going to be? Maybe you can't say, but is this a diorama? Are these individual statues? Or
Quarter scale.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
so
whole.
it's interesting because when we showed the Terry Bogard statue, right, which is kind of like a diorama, but and standalone as well. But he can also connect with the upcoming Geese Howard statue that we kind
Oh,
of
cool.
teased before. But for the case of my Kyo and Yuri, you can display them side by side, but they're kind of standalone statues. So my Kyo Yuri will be like standalone quarter scale statues, um, you know, uh, but they're kind of designed also that when you put them, together side by side, you can see like they're kind of facing off each other as well.
Cool. Well, you would do that, right? You would present a picture of the two of them together, on the order page just to see how they look.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah, that's cool stuff.
Excellent. So I've been kind of a gamer my whole life, but Gina is in a self-imposed gaming exile.
Correct.
Charles has never been really into video games. So
Yeah.
you're a gamer yourself, Adeeb. If you had to pick one game for these two to try to get into gaming again or for the first time, what would you pick for them?
Oh man, that's a tough question. Because there's so many like I definitely like I used to play games when I was working in like in video games. I used to like almost play games like almost every day, but nowadays I barely have the times, and I just only play the rare gems that I get to play. Um, but if you were to ask me what game would I recommend to get back into gaming or get into gaming, very tricky. I would
Gina, you have a PS4, right?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, so you could start there.
let's see. I
So
would
not
pick,
gonna happen.
no, I would say like if you because I'm more of a story driven game person. Like I love games with good stories,
Okay.
not just fun gameplay. But I would recommend maybe The Last of Us if you've heard of
Yes,
it.
I've heard. See, I've
Okay.
heard
Yeah.
the same. I got that same advice that one I should try. I actually have the game.
I
I've just
have
never.
it too. I haven't
I've
played it
never
though.
opened. I haven't
It
opened it
came with
yet.
my PlayStation.
But I want to
Okay.
play it though. So have you tried the new Spider-Man for the
Oh,
PS4?
oh no, I haven't tried it yet, but I've definitely seen it. I want,
Okay.
I know I've actually kind of because I thought, oh, I would never have the time to play this open world game, so I actually went and checked out the story cutscenes on YouTube. Yeah, so I kind of like the story,
Okay.
but yeah, that that's sadly what I do nowadays for games that I don't have time to play for. I mean, time to play.
You live
So
vicariously through others.
yeah,
Uh,
but
I I watch
uh,
my kids play.
yeah, but I definitely like would recommend like The Last of Us or even the new God of War. That's a
Okay.
fun game. So these are like kind of the pinnacle of the PS4 era, and I think yeah,
Right.
everyone should play it. Even if you don't have a PS4, those games are worth getting a PS4 for.
Excellent. Okay, so I think we're going to just kind of begin to wrap up the show here. Kinetiquettes, you have lots of exciting stuff coming. 2019. What would be the next for your fans out there? What is your first statue you expect to ship in 2019?
So we do have like some statues. We're starting to ship out. Like for example, the Femme Fatale Jury will be shipping soon. We have Cammy and Chili to follow soon after. Ryu.
do you have
Uh,
pictures of those?
I
um,
have I have jury. Just one second here. Uh,
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, so Jury will be the first to ship, then followed by Cammy, Chun-Li, and then Ryu as well. The Ryu versus Ken statue you showed earlier, so the
yeah.
Ryu is in production, so it will ship as well. But of course, we have like new statues to review, and of our new licenses and existing licenses. So we'll be focusing on the anime, the SNK characters, which we will show, and more to come down the line. Yeah, so it's like a lot of things lined up this year, and beyond that. So we'll see how it goes. But I think
Well,
I
it
can
sounds
say,
exciting. You've got like a dream come true happening here for you. Yeah, we could only be blessed by liking what we do, and if we can actually say we love what we do, then we're truly blessed. And it sounds like you're right where you want to be.
oh yes, I mean it's not all roses and rainbows, but it's like it's scary that you're doing something that you love, but at the same time there's a lot of people else someone there's a lot of competition, and then there's also there's the uncertainty whether a product will do well or not. But I think at the end of the day, like you said, it's if, are you happy at doing what you do? And if you are, I think you are blessed to be able to do that.
Sure, absolutely. And competition can be a good thing. you know, kind of in the right people, it brings out their best stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Like it definitely keeps you on your toes, and you need that to, keep yourself humble. Like you can't take what you have for granted. So it's good that you have competition to look up to.
Well, excellent. So, Gina, any last questions for Adeeb or?
No, I mean, I think we've covered everything, and you've been so open and articulate in your answers and and sort of giving us the information here and giving the viewers the information. So it's a real pleasure to have you on the show.
No problem.
Yeah, I second that. Adeeb, it was great having you on the show. We had a lot of fun.
Hold on. I have one last question.
Just
Do
snuck it
we
in.
have any new licenses in the works? Is there a company or a license? You don't have to tell us. I respect that. But are there new licenses that you have your eye on? Maybe meetings set up, maybe something.
What I can say is that we are looking into some new game licenses, but not the ones you'd expect, like the big games or the upcoming games. But we're actually looking into some games that are not that big in the sense that they're not big budget, but they do have a huge following in terms of like fan base. So
they're the ones who spend, by the way.
Yeah. So we're actually in a discussion with a couple of companies who have a huge fan base, but they're not big budget. So they're also a small team like us. So we're working something.
Well,
out.
you let us know, and we'll have you back on the show, and we'll talk about what's brewing over at Kinetiquettes for 2020 and beyond.
Yeah, of course. Glad to be here.
Excellent. So thanks once again, Adeeb, for joining us. We had a blast. This has been Shelf Space episode 14. Thanks for everyone for watching, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Great.